Hi, welcome to another edition of Philly Coco Presents Side Project Spotlight.
Yep.
With your host, Stephen, Kotaro, and Aaron.
Hey.
This is a bi-monthly or bi-weekly? Bi-weekly.
I think the term is bi-weekly, but it's twice a month, just to be clear. Twice a month.
Twice a month. Podcast of our progress in the road to making a watch app, at least for this season. So to recap where we were from episode 1, we had decided on building a watch app. We had talked about our motivations as to why, mainly because it was a nice, simple project. And this project is basically going to be a Kanji flashcard watch app that we would build and then deploy to the App Store, the Apple Watch App Store. So I think today we're going to have a couple topics to talk about our progress since then of what we've done for the 2 weeks prior. So
Yep.
Steve, if you want to start.
Yeah. So we've had we're kind of still getting our sea legs here, so it hasn't been as fast as maybe we originally planned, but stuff happens. So the biggest thing that happened that slowed us down was dealing with App Store Connect issues. So originally we talked about the last episode that we're setting up in a personal App Store Connect account, intentionally, in Aaron's account here. And that almost worked, except we ran into a problem trying to collaborate. Because in a personal account, you can't have multiple developers, apparently. Like, you can create developer roles, right? But you can't give them access to the download certificates. So you go into Xcode and you'll go into your accounts, and even though your Apple ID is a member of Aaron's team here, it wouldn't show. And so what happened is we couldn't build the app on his team or on his account, which means we'd have to create separate bundle IDs for all of us and put them on our own accounts. And that we thought that was probably a little cumbersome, so we decided that at least for development, we're going to build it in Kotaro's team account. His what do they call it? I guess they call it team or company account.
Company account, yeah.
So your company account, that way we'll share kind of a temporary bundle identifier. And then when we're done, we're going to basically upload it onto Aaron's account for publication, which sounds complicated, but it's really not. I've done it a bunch of times at the day job where external developers build it on one account. You need to change a bundle identifier. And
just so for clarity, for people who don't know, a bundle ID is basically, I guess you can kind of think of it like a social security number for your app ID within the
in the App Store.
App Store. So, but it's usually kept private within the team itself. So, or the account, it's usually just something that but if we were to push this up on the repo, we'd all have to come up with our own, to test it on device. We'd have to come up with our own IDs, and then that we can never update that to the repo, and it'd be a whole
thing. The bundle identifiers are universally unique in the App Store. So if you're gonna, it's one per app. So if you have the same app, you're trying to build it using the resources of multiple developer teams. That means you need 3 different unique identifiers. So they're actually 3 different apps. Mm-hmm. So that gets kind of confusing. That's why it's usually better just to pick one team, have everybody be a member of that developer team, use one bundle identifier. And so we're going a little bit off of book there where we're doing that, but then we're going to move it to a different team at the end. That's the plan anyway. And that's just a limitation of, Apple. They have an arbitrary limitation on personal accounts. Used to be worse though.
Yeah,
used to be worse. And so now I guess you can collaborate on App Store Connect metadata and such, but you can't really on developer stuff. It's a little awkward. It's kind of not obvious. They do say something to that effect, but it's only on it's a paragraph of text on one webpage that I could find.
Yeah, that's kind of what threw me off when I first thought we could do it that way.
Yeah.
They have all the things for different roles and stuff like that, but it's really just for, I guess, management of the store account purposes and not for development.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward when you first look at it because Apple used to have two separate kinds of accounts. They used to have like accounts that dealt with certificates and identifiers and such. Then they had accounts that dealt with App Store Connect metadata, that kind of thing. Then they combined the two so you could access it all from App Store Connect. But when they did that, they had to do some, I think, awkward merging of roles and responsibilities and, giving you some way of giving people access to stuff that was originally in a completely different system. So I find that since they did the merge, it's been a little bit, so it had some growing pains there, like for a while. But you get used to it.
So that was the App Store one, which in a way wasn't a tremendous time suck, but it was sort of a mental suck of like how sort of messed us up a little bit in terms of like terms. Keep in mind, like all of us have sort of day jobs, so this is sort of like nights and weekends kind of things that we're doing here. Or that's the challenge for us, at least. In any side project, for that matter, finding the time to, and committing the time to work on this project. It's with any side project for sure. Having said that, probably the next thing we can talk about, at the very least, it was really quickly done and well done, was the first episode.
Oh, the podcast?
The podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, so episode 1, I mean, you've probably heard it if you're listening to this. If not, this probably doesn't make as much sense. But yeah, that went pretty well. So I guess I'll talk about how we set up the podcast for those that might want to do something similar. We had to select a podcast host. So if you're completely unfamiliar about how a podcast works, you need to have a host, somewhere to put the actual MP3 files and serve them up as an RSS feed. And then you need to set up your podcast in the various directories you want it to be in. And in our case, we really need it to be in the Apple directory. Okay, so there's two systems that I need to set up. One was for the host, one was with Apple. So for the host, we chose Anchor at the moment. They are a Spotify company, or it is Spotify. I don't know how you call it. They used to be independent. When they're free host, and since we're kind of bootstrapping here, they automatically put you in Spotify. And in order to create an account with them, you need an email address. So we created an email address. I think I made a Gmail address, and then we use that to create an Anchor account. Then you just have to upload some artwork for it. You set up your metadata, like what your name is, for your podcast, and the name of the publisher of the podcast. In our case, it's Philly Coca Heads Association, which is the name of our organization, the legal name. And then you have to choose where you want to distribute it to. And there's two ways of doing an Anchor. You can have Anchor do it all for you, in which case they will set up your account in the directories on their own, like using their accounts on those. Like I have one podcast that does that. And it's the downside of that is you don't have any control anymore. You can't log into Apple's directory and see what's going on. You have to go through some hoops to gain control of that back again. So this time I figured we'll just do it ourselves, and we only really need Apple. So once Anchor's set up, you have to get the RSS feed URL from your host or from Anchor. And then you have to create an account at Podcast Connect. And so the Podcast Connect account is actually the most pain in the butt thing, because you first need to create a Apple ID, but like a completely active Apple ID. And they don't really tell you exactly what this involves. If you look at Apple's help, you need to create an Apple ID. So we had an email address, so I created a regular Apple ID. But then when you go to log into Podcast Connect for it and create your Podcast Connect account, it gives you this little box that says that you need to like activate it or something. You need to do something, but it doesn't tell you what it is you need to do. So here's a little tip for you. Create your Apple ID, log into Podcast Connect, and then you'll get this message, right? What you need to do is you need to open up Apple Music, and then you need to sign in with the Apple ID you just created. And you need to go into your account inside Apple Music, and there's like a button there to set up your credit card and stuff. You have to do that on your Apple ID. But once you're in your Apple Music, there'll be a section to like verify that your account is set up to buy things from iTunes. It's a throwback to iTunes and how that used to work, or how it still works, I guess, behind the scenes from a long, long time ago. So it's kind of confusing because all these Apple systems are built on the old iTunes system where you sold songs for 99 cents. Remember? And so it's all built like around these. I don't know how old these systems are, but it wants you to go in there and activate your account and say, yeah, here's my credit card. Yes, you can use this, and then once you get through that, you have to agree to these terms of use, in Apple Music, right? Like you're never going to use it. You're never going to buy anything probably with this Apple ID. But once you do that, then you go into Podcast Connect. All of a sudden, it lets you in, and it's just it's ridiculous, and it's really not written down anywhere. It's bizarre. I don't know why they don't put in the instructions. If you're using your existing
Apple, write a whole blog on it.
I actually probably will write something and just take some screenshots, make it like easier to understand. They'll probably it's probably not something that comes up with a lot of people. They just use their existing Apple ID, like their one Apple ID. But we wanted to make completely separate. I'm kind of old school. I like to have completely separate accounts sometimes for things. For like I have complete separate work accounts, personal accounts. Yeah. And it makes managing this stuff a little bit more difficult sometimes. But in this case, I thought it was worth it. So once we got it set up in Podcast Connect, all you have to do at that point is take your RSS feed you got from Anchor or wherever your host is, and you add your podcast to it. Now, if you set up all your metadata on Anchor, what it's going to do is going to download all that information in the RSS feed. So it's going to get your name of your podcast, it's going to get your description, it's going to get a bunch of information. And then you might need to choose a few options and like what categories it's in, but you might not, because usually your host lets you do that on their end, and then it all flows into Podcast Connect. So then it'll create this record for your podcast in Apple's directory, and then you'll have to submit it for review. And the last time I did this, I remember it took like a week or more, right, for them to review. This time it was instant. So I don't know if they just stopped doing reviews or something about our podcast was so banal that they're like, it's not going to be an issue. But it like immediately got through review, and then it was just a matter of waiting like 10 minutes for caches to.
Well, I'm sure they must have had some kind of like explicit content check on stuff we were saying.
Oh yeah, maybe.
And I don't think in our last episode we were so angry that we were cursing about anything.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Oh
yeah.
One more thing is to say, you need to have at least one episode in your feed before you can do this. So that's why we had to wait till after we recorded our first episode and got it published in Anchor. It had to be completely published in public. Then you could get the RSS feed and put it into Podcast Connect. But now that's in Podcast Connect, I mean, it's automatically in most of, if not all of the podcast apps that are on the iPhone. It's an Apple's app. It's an Overcast, because Overcast explicitly says they use that directory as a backup when it's not on there. They use it as a feeder. And pretty much everybody does that on the iOS. So that's why we're out there now.
Get any feedback on the first episode, or crickets?
I didn't get any feedback, although there are methods of doing feedback on Anchor. I didn't get feedback.
Sure.
We've had a handful of plays, not too many yet, but it's just beginning.
It's fine.
We've had some people in the community, spread the word a little bit on the social medias.
My gratitude.
Yes, so thank you very much
shout
for
out
that.
to Zoran.
Yes, Zoran. Yeah, we have our breakdown is 33% Apple Podcast, 33% Overcast, and 33% web browser. So I don't know. And again, and someone in Seattle, and then is listening to us apparently.
Hello from Seattle. Or from Philly, I should say.
Yeah. Well, most
Hello,
are from
Seattle
Philly.
from Philly.
Yeah, Anchor, I mean, like your podcast host is going to give you different kinds of information. So, yeah, ours is split between, our listeners is split between me and Philadelphia. Because where most people listen to it. So, it's not many people, but I think it'll grow. It'll probably, as we move forward.
Sure.
So that was our podcast. I mean, it's probably kind of boring if you're not into it, but podcast setup is much easier than it used to be. Pretty straightforward nowadays. So that's very, very cool.
Yeah, I mean, this particular podcast, there's an assumption that these the listeners are probably either aspiring or existing iOS developers. So
it's so easy
it's
now.
It's very niche in that regard.
It is, but I mean, podcasts aren't niche. But yeah, the people, the Venn diagram of people interested in making a podcast and listening to us It's probably niche.
The Zen diagram.
The Venn. The Venn. Did I say Zen? The Venn should be the name of the title. The Zen diagram.
That's win right there.
So it's easy now. So if you want to do one of these kinds of things, go for it. And then if you're curious, I think we might have mentioned it before. We're recording this on Zoom, which works pretty well for recording podcast stuff. And then you set up Zoom on whoever is going to be the host on their computer to record separate audio separate audio files, make it easier to do editing. And then I do some editing in Logic Pro, which I got for that academic discount because I work at a university, the day job. So
sure,
got
cool. Okay, so let's go into the meat of the sort of discussion here in terms of the progress of the app itself. And, full disclosure for me, at least, I have not been putting as much effort into this week, these past 2 weeks, partially because I'm starting up a new contract full time. So that's a little bit, it's a little bit tough to like mentally readjust. Yeah. Because it's such a contrast in many ways to my previous contract. Mm-hmm. Having said that, my personal commitment to you guys is to sort of figure out a way to better break up my time, break up some time during the week and commit to that. So I will try to update you on terms of like when I'll be working on the project and like when I'm going to commit some hours here or there throughout the week, and then kind of at least give you an idea of what I'll be working on during that period. And most of my stuff will be focused on wireframe. I think, Aaron, maybe it might be good for me to at least configure the core data section to start. That way you can focus much more about finding the kanji dictionary that you think you can work best with to parse, as well as work with you on getting because that should inform the elements that you would want to look for in the beginning. I mean, you and I have both talked about it, of what we want to see.
We might want to do like some other kind of design session, like data modeling design session.
Yeah.
In addition to the podcast, if you have time, because some details to be worked out.
Yeah, that would be probably useful. I mean, we could even talk about to some basic extent right now, and then I can.
I have I think 3 candidate data sources that I've been looking at.
Cool.
We can get into that if you want to talk about that.
Yeah,
now,
I mean, did you want to share the screen or anything?
I guess I can show you. I don't know how familiar you are with like the Python data science, like basic data analysis pipeline. I don't know if you're familiar with that stuff at all.
I am not.
Since this is an Apple podcast.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, it's some data science stuff. So I'm working in since we've talked a little bit about how Xcode was crashing just from large JSON files, which in the data science world would be considered very small data sets, but Xcode can't handle it. So I'm using Python, and as a environment, I'm using Google Collaboratory, or Collab as most people call it, which is like a hosted by Google, free hosted Python data science environment that's like everything is set up. So, I mean, you can run stuff locally, but then you get it into all kinds of like the development environment things and installing dependencies, and there's various things you can deal with that. But I just wanted to fire up some quick notebooks to look at some data sets.
Right. So you are using Python.
Yeah.
And so your day job though is more data science, right?
Sort of. Or not really. It was more of a kind of the plan, but so I went through this data science course and
very cool.
So
see, but it's coming in handy here. You never know what skills will come back to help.
So let's see. I can share this.
I mean, what we did before in the previous the previous one, I think it was JSON. and we use the Sublime text editor or Visual Studio Code. I don't remember which one. Like I prefer Sublime, but even Sublime was having trouble with that text file. So Visual Studio Code did a reasonable job. I mean, if you were really going to get, if you're really willing to pay for the money, BB Edit probably would have been the right choice since it can handle that kind of large text file.
Yeah, BB Edit, they're not a sponsor or anything, but BB Edit has never failed me in opening gigantic files.
You got a license?
No, I have the free version. Even that's good enough for a lot of stuff.
Oh, really? I didn't know. I knew they had a free version before called Text Wrangler.
Yeah, then they merged it. It's now there's just BB Edit. There's like the free version. It has a lot of stuff turned off, obviously, but basic text editing works.
Downloading now.
All right.
Yeah, very nice.
I don't know if you want to look at some of these notebooks that I made.
That's very cool.
Just like
so, these notebooks are you trying to?
So this is just like look at some data from different sources. Most of them are like some kind of Creative Commons license.
Mm-hmm. So how did you find these sources?
Just Google. Looked at some different websites and other apps that have compiled. Is this what is it? This is not. This Kanji dict seems like it's one of the.
It says Kanji DIC2.
DIC2.
This
is one that you downloaded from the Kanji Dick's website.
Yeah. It's like a university project or something like that. We would give like full credit.
As long as
using what seems like most other sources like source this one, but theirs is all in XML. So I'm using like the XML parsing thing to parse out everything. So after some terrible code, I get like a looking thing.
For the listeners here, Aaron is showing us the his screen, and he wrote some beautiful Python code. Aaron, beautiful, way better than we would write. And it's I don't really remember, but it's way better. Way better than the Perl I used to write too. So he wrote this, and it's extracting from this like a little column.
It's like a 50 megabyte or something JSON or XML file or something like that. That contains all this stuff on 13,000 kanjis.
Wow!
Nice. So you have the literal. Is that that number, that index number in the far left?
This is just like the spreadsheet.
Spreadsheet. Oh, okay.
It's the index of the row in Pandas, which is
not
the
in the
library
data.
The literal, the stroke count, the meaning, the reading.
So what's reading?
Like that's the pronunciation. It's like basically how you would say it in Japanese. It's the hiragana. So it's
hiragana.
Oshi,
so it's same for the listeners. It looks different. Like there's the literal kanji. Is what is that called? The way that it's drawn.
Oh, the kanji. You're talking about. So the literal is the kanji.
The kanji and the reading is the
hiragana.
Hiragana, and it's like two different kinds of scripts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's like the reading is like the Japanese alphabet, and the literal. Think of it as the kanji equivalent,
right? Because
the Chinese kanji equivalent.
We had talked about this before. I don't know if we had recorded last time, but like, what doesn't kanji the way kanji is written? Isn't that come from China long ago? Like, so that's similar.
I mean,
but they don't mean the same thing. But they're similar looking.
It means generally the same thing.
Okay.
Or from a broad context. Yeah. So
we're trying to do a kanji app. Like what we're trying to do is you're trying to recognize those strokes, and then you're going to try to figure out like what are we going for, the pronunciation or the meaning, or both, or something else.
I think a little bit of both, because you want to be able to understand when you hear it, or when you see it when you read it, you kind of want to know how they would say it, how it would sound in Japanese, in hiragana. So I think it's important to know that. So so all these are relatively important. The radical.
So this the one problem with this data source, it only has the radical as like an index number representing like one of the 214 like most common radicals.
What's
So then
a
you have
radical?
to use another database as a
to
source
map
to
the
actually
radical.
know what it actually looks like, because this is just an integer.
Can you define what's a
represents it.
radical? Because I'm not familiar with any of this stuff. Aaron
Kotaro,
and
you
Kotaro,
probably Kotaro, I'll let you explain.
yeah. You guys have been working on this before.
I mean,
I don't know.
to be honest, like my understanding of radicals is a little more like I think they're much more like foundational, like characters. I'm really setting myself up for a fail here, but
that's okay. I know nothing. Just give me a clue. I'm looking for a clue so I can follow the conversation.
Just like from
It's
my
like a building
limited
block
study,
Kanji.
yeah, it's like the building block or
okay.
the root of it, and it's like the visual.
Okay.
Like there's this visual, like simpler characters embedded in this more complicated character, and
So-
you can actually see it, and it'll be like covering like the left or the right or the top or the bottom. In some section of it will be this one root.
Okay,
character.
I think I'm grasping the concept.
Like if
more.
you look it up, you can see they'll.
It's
if you
like-
look up kanji radicals, you'll see.
Yeah,
what
it's
that
basically
looks
like
The user of this app is someone who's going to already be able to read Kajikana enough to be able to learn to understand how to read, how to pronounce it, right? Because like if I was using this app, I don't think I could if the data set is this. 'Cause I don't know. I mean, at least not pronunciation, because I can't understand anything. I can only
one trick we could do. I don't know if speech to text works on the watch, right?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I think so. I don't remember. I haven't looked at that
Because we
in
could.
a while.
I'm not entirely sure how that works with other languages, right? If you identify the language of the text, can you have it pronounce it correctly back to you? That's something we could. That's something we could test. So we could probably have an audio button, like on the top side, like a round audio button at the top, to pronounce it, right? So that way you can hear it the way it's pronounced. It might not necessarily be the same given the context of a sentence.
Yeah.
It might not be pronounced the same, but you at least get a sense of how you would hear it.
So what I'm saying is, who's the target though for this? Is I guess what I was asking originally. Is it someone like me who has no knowledge of anything, is going from zero and would be using this in some way, or is it someone who's already has other materials that they're studying, they're maybe in a class, whatever? There's just a supplement.
Yeah, there's a supplement for sure, because you would have to have an understanding. You would have to like the way they normally would start you off, at least in an American context, is that you would have to understand the sort of phonetics with the Romaji style approach, which was much more amenable to just understanding the phonetics first of the language, and then they begin to teach you hiragana, and then they're teaching the kanji. So kanji is kind of like
the final form,
the second, or I wouldn't necessarily the final form, but certainly like it's like okay, now you're ready to get up on the adult table.
So it's called Romanji.
Romanji.
What is it?
Romanji.
Romanji when you're using
when you're spelling out the phonetics.
Phonetics in a way that
with the English alphabet.
So do these databases include that data anywhere, or is that even relevant for this? Because that's what I'm trying to say. Like, we have to decide who's the target user of this, so that we're not trying to do features that are unnecessary right now or wouldn't be helpful to them or something. Especially with a watch, I think we need to be really laser focused on who we're aiming for, at least at first.
That's a good point. I
think
you
probably can find it or create it, but it's more how much data we want to show on the watch.
I was going to say also, even a 50 meg database, is that too much for the watch?
I don't think it'll be 50 meg by the time we...
No. Not by the time.
That has a bunch of extra stuff that we don't need.
Okay. So,
yeah.
I'm not really sure how... I don't have any intuition about the resource limitations on a watch, and I guess it also depends on which model watch you have. So if we're targeting 3, which is like the one that won't die, the watch that won't die, that's really limited. But everything else beyond that is probably going to be a lot easier to get working.
Right. Yeah, and in many ways, like I kind of like that constraint as much as other iOS developers don't like it because it's such a new platform for us. Keeping it as simple as possible because of that constraint in many ways is going to be helpful for us.
Constraints,
not to go too deep in the woods, so to speak.
Well, yeah, constraints can breed creativity.
I agree.
We talked about some of the database stuff. So, Aaron, you sounds like you're kind of picked a database that you want to try first, because you said you had like 3 of them, but is one?
I can show you some of the other one. The other one seems like somebody else kind of did what I did and then turned that one into JSON, and there's a bunch of other things that they added.
I mean, what's your opinion on the one that we should move forward with?
I like this one, because the one that I was just showing you, because it seems like the reference that everybody else cites.
Right.
So might as well start from that one. And
I mean, that's good enough for me to go with.
Try to add what
and
what we need. If we need more, we can kind of merge other sources.
Can you convert that to JSON?
Yeah. It's already like in the format I showed you. It's like basically a spreadsheet. Now I can just say write it to a JSON or write it to a.
So if it has the data we need and you can get it converted, then I say we've selected our database to start with.
Yeah, but then it's more how are we going to use it? That's what we were kind of talking about.
Yeah, so
are we using like the first meaning, or are we using all the meanings and going to have them all in our database, and how are we going to pick one to display on the watch and things like that?
Right. I guess it's tough because like it's such a compact space. You can only fill in so much for the meaning, right? So we might even have to do something like a glorified scroll view inside that card or something of that nature.
Because the whole purpose of this thing is kind of less of like learning them and more just testing whether you know them already.
A review.
So I don't know how much data, whether we're going to like link to some other source or something.
Yeah, I think we should keep
it
like,
if you actually want to learn this, then go outside of this app.
That's why I was asking earlier. I don't think this is geared towards someone like me trying to learn.
No, it's not really. It's more to
so it's more for me
it already.
Yes,
yeah. It's more for me to build up my vocabulary. So it's a selfish app up for one.
No, that's great. So it's a selfish app for one that you got 3 people to help, 2 other people to help build. No, it's a. I think that's great. You have to keep in mind what is your app about, who is it targeting, who the user is, because it's really easy for us to go off into the weeds and look into features we don't need or waste time spinning our wheels. That's why I'm saying if it's a flashcard app for people who already have other materials, already learning this, then what are the features it needs specifically, like data wise and then UI wise?
So, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think Aaron might, you might be able to talk about the data. Like, what do you actually need minimally to display a flashcard app like this?
Minimally, you would need just the character and then like a link to like a outside API for like, or open on your phone a display of like all the back of the card, because I feel like it would just kind of be a mess try to display tons of stuff of so what should be the back of the flashcard. But you could probably figure out how to do it with like different scrolling lists of
what's
stuff.
On the back of a flashcard for this? Like what kind of
like all the other meaning stuff that isn't just the character.
I mean, how much of that do you want on or culture? Maybe you can answer this because it's for you. You're saying that.
Right.
What do you need on the back of a flashcard, and then consider that it's also on your watch, so it's really small flashcard.
I don't need that much, really. Maybe the hiragana, maybe like the first meaning or 2. Maybe if it's only like 2 lines, maybe if you have if it's truncated and you tap on that text, maybe it can expand to the full meaning in a scroll view. That's a UI question. The way I'm thinking it in my mind at the moment, you tap on a card shows up, you tap on it. If you want to see the meaning. If you already know it, you can either swipe left or right. Maybe left to say you did it, right to say you failed, and then that's it. That because we're only doing a card every maybe every hour or every whatever the user configured, right? Every once it's 3 times a day, right?
Yeah.
And then that way we can kind of keep it simple that way. Now, in terms of the meaning, like Aaron said, sure, it would be, maybe we could figure out a way to provide a link that says, if you want the full complex understanding of this app, understanding of this character, tap here and, maybe you'll see like a web view.
But you really just need the kanji and on the back, like a brief meaning.
Yeah.
That's essentially what you're looking for.
Yeah. I think maybe if we wanted like,
and then maybe a link.
Maybe if the meaning becomes like a big deal to us as we test.
Yeah.
I think tapping on the text, like the meaning text, and have it like expand out
to more information.
To more information, like a scroll view. Then that would work.
So some of this, I think, some of these questions can be answered when we're prototyping, which is what we have to move into next. But I just wanted to get at the core of like, do we have a data set? And the answer seems to be yes. And in that data set, what specifically do we need so Aaron can parse that stuff out so we can start and get it into a database that a core data database, and then just start prototyping, because we're using Swift UI. We should be able to prototype stuff pretty quickly.
Yeah, agreed. So Aaron, I guess within this next 2 weeks, if you can, at the very least, get this is fine actually. Just get this parsed into a JSON and then add it to our project, and then we'll figure out. We'll talk about how we're going to store that data, whether even the watch can just pull the JSON easily would be fine. Might be okay, but that's something we can test.
I'm gonna guess, not knowing anything about this, about how core data works on the watch, but it's probably more power efficient to use a core data stack than parsing JSON.
Yeah, for sure. If that's the case, Aaron, then we would say, okay, well, how do we import that? Because it's all going to be when the user opens their app, right? They're going to have this preset of this preset of data. What's that?
It needs to be fast. Like, it can't be loading forever, especially on the older watch, if we can help it.
Yeah. Well, you could do it. Yeah, it's pretty easy to fetch it. The question is when the app is first open for the very first time, right? That core data needs to be filled with all the kanji. I know there's a trick, or I've heard of the trick where you can create the core, you can pre-fill a core database, like a SQLite database, in like some kind of process, like a command line process or something,
right?
Where you can and then you can take that SQLite database and then bring it into the Xcode project,
right?
And then that way, instead of like it doing it itself, you would already have done it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there has to be some way of pre-filling it, right? I mean, there's a lot of apps that have a source of data that comes with them.
Yeah.
Already.
I think the main problem with that is, or I don't think it's really going to be a problem for us, but since we're not trying to write any data to this default database. So I think that's where people run into problems, where they want to like write more data and then you actually have to copy the whole thing over.
Right. Okay.
But I think we're just going to use this default stuff, and then anything where we save user data, it'll be a separate database.
Yeah, I guess in a full-fledged app, you might just, download it or something when it launched the first time. But because we're doing everything on a watch, and we're not even doing a companion app beyond what you need the shell for to get it in the store and everything, we really need to make sure everything is preloaded as much as we can.
And also, I feel like this like default data is really not going to change.
No.
I don't know how often this dictionary gets updated.
Yeah, I mean, but you could build an update mechanism.
Yeah.
But at first, I mean, how much? Yeah, I mean, how often is it going to change? Probably the meaning of kanji don't change that fast, right?
I mean, yeah, I mean, most of it will probably be, well, yeah, it depends on if a new character, is defined.
Yeah, I mean, but again, this we're talking about version 1.0, and some of these other ideas are great for a future version, but like we don't need them right now. We don't need an update mechanism necessarily right now. We just need a database that that works, and it's not too big.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So I think I think we can kind of work out if we can do the first path is getting that JSON version of that data that you've built, you've constructed. Then I guess we have to commit to either setting up core data. I guess that, yeah, we've committed to that.
I mean, core data. I mean, it could just be a SQLite database, and we could access it directly with one of those like libraries we wanted to too. But I mean, core data is the native tools. I think we should stick with the native.
And Swift UI really works really well, assuming your core data is set up correctly.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay,
I like core data now.
It's
with
Swift super
UI.
seamless with a properly defined core data stack.
I don't know how to properly define that stack though, but I think
I've messed around a little bit with it, so I think it's a lot easier than it used to be. So, but
100%
goes.
Yeah, so I mean, and until we have like a database set up in there, there's not really
especially
much.
It's like we're not doing a lot of writes. It's like a pretty,
I mean,
read
just
only kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think we talked about before. We might be able to just what writes we need to do. We might be able to do in like the defaults database or something.
Yeah, the only complex part we have to worry about is how to pre-fill that data. In core data on app launch. And not, I mean, on the initial app launch, whether we have it already like a pre-done SQLite database.
Ideally, we want it to be pre-loaded.
Yeah.
Before
they launch it.
Yes. And so, has anyone ever done that? I mean, is that not a thing?
I haven't personally done it, but it's a thing people do. So
I know it's a thing. I knew it's a thing people do. But is it built into any of the like Xcode, the tools or anything around?
No, it's just kind of like you load it, you like build something in your simulator.
Okay, yeah.
And you just like extract the database from your simulator bundle.
That's what I thought you could do. I mean, isn't it just a SQL database
exactly
with a
it's just like a
SQLite
format file, I think, and you just like grab it out of the simulator bundle.
It's exactly that. Yeah.
So that sounds like it's not going to be a big challenge. Just once we just fill it.
So Aaron, do you want to handle that part? Once you and I would talk about this, but then from an implementation standpoint, can you handle that part?
Yeah, I should be able to. I'll let you know if I run into any problems.
And then what I'm going to do is focus on the UI component just to get all the elements of the interactions working, and then we can kind of go from there. And then so for by the next time we meet up, I will have at least all the UI elements working in some form of capacity, so you can actually see the interactions of what I'm thinking we do.
Okay.
And then Aaron, for you, just use it like a test view or something, just to see how to see all the kanjis.
Yeah, hopefully we can like refine this, like how the data is structured, so we're not like accessing everything.
Yeah,
probably in the like the first thing, just be everything will come out as like one database row, but that's probably unnecessary.
Yeah.
Just having all those different meanings and all that access when we don't need to display it. So depending on how we end up structuring the views of
that's an interesting architecture. That's an interesting architectural point, right? Because when you open up a kanji, the user, for the most part, we're trusting the user to know whether or not they did it right. Like they're only hurting themselves.
Yeah.
If they're trying to cheat. So like, if they get it, if they don't get it, then they just move on. And that's the whole point of the app. And maybe later on we talk about like providing the user stats. So I might need to look into how to record that bit of data. And that, I don't know if we need, Aaron and I have done this before where we've sort of separated, separate that logic into like user defaults, just because that data is not so, it's not complex in terms of like what's the, like this person got, actually, no, I take that back. It was a little complex.
Yeah, so we probably would want to use core data if we were going to have like a whole complicated like stats view.
Mhm.
Probably would need a separate database for all that stuff. So
Right.
that's kind of driven by
Yeah, I mean, again,
what you want it to look like, what you want the views to look like.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I would think that we should probably create the issues for all this stuff in GitHub so we keep track of these feature ideas in our backlog, because I don't think we're going to get to all of them, but
Right. Yeah.
that's What
I guess
what else?
to start, we can again, like this October is really all about prototyping the core mechanic.
Yeah, and you have a
So-
good idea in your mind of what you want that to be. So
Right.
so this week, we'll be able to review that
Mhm.
and give you some feedback.
Yeah. So let me do this then. Early this week, I'm going to make sure I have the wireframes done, at least like a very basic rudimentary one of like the interactions. And then I'll set up a meeting with Aaron to talk about the database and sort of how we're going to do that pre-fill, what approach we're going to go with.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we kind of have our implementation expectations, right? Defined.
I think so. I mean, at least the first draft of it, we wanted to have like the card to. We want to have some kind of like note. Want to have like a notification or something, or do we want just to launch the app? Like that was one of the things we've gone back and forth about.
To start for now, launch the app. But
Just launch
definitely
that.
we definitely want to
Yeah.
do notifications.
Yeah. So we launch the app. We see a kanji.
Mhm.
Not sure how that kanji is chosen. Maybe randomly. Maybe some other algorithm.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, it's a whole other thing. So we have but we see a kanji,
Mhm.
and then I swipe a direction or not to indicate whether I understand it or I know.
Yeah.
Okay, and then if I want to get the definition, I tap it, and then I see the back of the card has definition of it
Mhm.
in some shortened form, and then maybe I can expand the definition to see even more information if I choose to. But the idea is quick interaction, so I can go through multiple kanji in a session by swiping, or is it just one at a time? Because that's another distinction.
That's true. Yeah,
Because once you're in the app,
it would be really smart if we could kind of group related ones together.
Yeah,
Related
possibly.
kanji together.
But
But
these are
I
great.
don't know. That's like a whole separate thing.
But just for interaction, if I launch the app and I see a kanji, right, and I swipe, like I have to be able to get the next one somehow.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, I would think like one of those dating apps, like it just shows you the next one.
Yeah, I think that for sure. Within the app, you should do
within
that.
the app, but not yeah.
So yeah, I'll make sure that works. That's kind of interesting too, because we do have to make sure that it's kind of a leveling up system. So over time, like if you get this character right so many times, it's like all right, we know you know this one, and we'll bring this one up less frequently, and we'll bring up the more harder ones now, and as you go.
You might need to track in the database how many times you see something or how many times you got it right. So I mean, it sounds like
that's an interesting point, right? Because then what we can do.
It sounds like we're going to need to track some basic stats in order to make this useful as a learning tool. Because a learning tool like this, you need to track your progress somehow, and so it makes sense to me that the software would do that for me. I'm not going to want to write down a note or something, whether no. So we're going to have to track that as well. Like, did you get it right, or did you indicate that you got it right or wrong, so that we can maybe throttle how often you see them. So if you get something right, you're going to want to see it again in the future because you're going to want to be reminded of it, because that's how you learn things, by being forced to recall them, right?
Yeah.
But maybe you won't be as often as something that you're getting wrong consistently. So that could be a pretty simple algorithm. Is probably too saying it's more than it is, but it could be pretty straightforward to implement that. Not say simple. I don't like using simple. Possibly straightforward doesn't mean it's easy. It just means like I can see the end. Just getting there is hard. Okay, it sounds like you guys have a lot going on. What am I doing for next time besides the podcast? I guess like to get this
podcast, adding it to the website,
build the app, and we're trying to get a website up. Yeah, phillycoca.org I think is where we're going to put it, right?
Yeah,
because we need to put it somewhere. Okay, so
and I don't know what your So from that standpoint, I think it's still early.
Yeah, it's pretty early. You guys, I mean, right now there's not a lot for me to do on the code until, we have something
Right. And then
the Kanji database set up and everything.
So what is the other things that what do you feel comfortable contributing? I guess there's notifications, maybe play around with that a little bit, just to experiment.
Yeah, I mean, I've done notifications plenty of times I've done notifications on a phone. I don't know how different it is on a watch only.
Yeah, so that's a story that I think we would need to get a better sense of. So if you have time, some research behind that. We're getting close. Yeah, we're getting close to the end of this podcast. Is there anything else we need to discuss about that of what we're going to do for this next 2 weeks in order to, because that is going to indicate next 2 weeks is pretty much the end, close to the end of October. So
we need to move in. And our next time we're going to be meeting for our I guess our sprint retrospective, whatever we're calling this, is going to be Halloween.
Oh,
so
okay.
Currently, that's what it's scheduled for. might change.
We'll see how that goes.
But yeah, so I have down that Kotaro is, and we should probably update the GitHub to track all this stuff. But Kotaro is you're going to work on some wireframes and a prototype UI. Even you can get that far? Oh well, it's Swift UI. So
I got it close, but I mean, I got like the flipping card part working.
Okay,
but now it's like the gestures to swipe left or right.
You can show us that next time. You're gonna parse that Kanji database, and I'm doing obviously this podcast. I'm gonna get the app built on my machine, try to get my M1 problems worked out, and I'm gonna try work on the website and look at the notifications side of the story because we really want to be able to notify you about stuff. So I think that's pretty good. I think that's a lot of stuff for us to work on in our copious amounts of free time.
Sure.
And I know that Kotaro has a heart out, so I think we're going to have to wrap it up here. Any final words of wisdom for the audience?
Aaron?
No, I don't think so. We'll see how we do.
We'll see if it was, again, I mean, we did advertise this. Will we succeed or will we fail? Only subscribers will know.
No pressure.